notes, this is the first point. Zacchaeus, he was seeking Jesus, but he was hindered. Zacchaeus was seeking Jesus, but he was hindered. He was completely hindered. You see, the people knew exactly who he was. He was not liked. Jesus is coming into town. He wanted to see Jesus, and they prevented him from seeing Jesus. The crowd did. The crowd prevented him from seeing Jesus. All he wanted to do was see Jesus. He was craving to see Jesus. You see, there was such excitement around Jesus. And he happened to come through Jericho, and the crowd pushed him aside. The crowd pushed Zacchaeus aside. And he was a genuine seeker. He just desperately wanted just to see Jesus. But the crowd pushed him aside. And you know, we all have crowds in our life. Every single one of us. We have crowds that may hinder us from seeing Jesus. It may be our work. It may be our family that prevent us to see Jesus. It could be school. And sometimes it's the church that prevents us to see Jesus. See, even with these crowds in our lives, we are to seek Jesus at all costs. We are to seek Jesus at all costs. The second thing Zacchaeus was determined to see Jesus. Beyond the crowds, he was hindered by the crowds, but he was determined to see Jesus. He could have said, and he could have gave up, and he could have said, you know what? I tried to see him. The crowd prevented me. Go home and say, you know what? At least I tried. And you know what? His life would have not been transformed. He would have not known this hope, this love, this gospel. He would have not been able to enter the kingdom of heaven because he was determined. He did not make any excuses. He didn't make any excuses to see Jesus. He said, you know what? I'm going to go climb a tree. I'm going to see him. No matter what, I'm going to see Jesus. And he went and he climbed up a tree. And look what happened. Jesus calls him. And he goes and he eats with he has Jesus at his house. And his life is transformed from the inside out.
Amen.
And we can compare this. In Luke chapter 18, just a few verses before this, we read the account of the rich young ruler. And the rich young ruler came to Jesus and he said, what must I do to follow you? What must I do to be saved? And he says, keep the commandments. He's like, oh, that's awesome. I've already done that. And he goes, there's one thing that you lack. Sell all your possessions and give to the poor. And the rich young ruler left because he was sad because he had so much wealth. He did not want to do that. He did not want to give up his wealth to follow Jesus. Completely opposite of Zacchaeus. The rich young ruler gave excuses to follow Jesus. Zacchaeus did not. Zacchaeus earnestly sought Jesus. The rich young ruler left. A thing to just think about. Jesus never went and chased after the rich young ruler. He let him go. And that's another sermon. But what excuses are we making to follow Jesus? What excuses do we make to seek after Jesus? I don't have enough time. Oh, my work schedule is too busy. I don't want to deal with my sins, so I'm not going to follow Jesus. You see, every single one of us has an excuse not to follow Jesus. Every single one of us. Are we going to be determined to follow Jesus just like Zacchaeus? So Zacchaeus was seeking Jesus, but he was hindered. He also was determined to see Jesus. And Zacchaeus was called by Jesus. He was called by Jesus. This is so, I just picture the excitement here. Jesus is walking and there's a huge crowd and, you would expect little kids to be up in the tree, not a grown man, and he's going by. And he looks up and he says, Zacchaeus. Jesus knew his name. He's God. He said, come on down. I'm going to go to your house and I'm going to have a meal with you. Jesus knew his name. He called him by name. The thing is, Zacchaeus knew exactly what type of person he was. He knew exactly what type of person he was because he had no friends. He had no family. He knew that he sold them all out to do this job to be extremely rich and wealthy. He knew he cheated people. He knew exactly what type of person he was. And so he determined to go to the extreme to see Jesus. The result was Jesus called him by name. Jesus said, come on down. And Jesus had a meal with him. One of the most intimate things that you can do in this culture is to have a meal with somebody. And Jesus is saying, I'm going to have a meal with you. I'm going to engage in the most intimate act that I can possibly have with you. And so he did. And Zacchaeus completely opened his whole life to Jesus. He left nothing. He did not hold back anything to Jesus. He let his whole life just spill out before Jesus. And what was the result? His life was changed. He was making restitution. And Jesus said, salvation has come to this house because he's the son of Abraham. He called Jesus called him by name. And you know what? He knows every single one of our names. He knows every hair that's on our heads. Some of us, it's easier to count than others. He knows you so intimately. We don't have to hide anything from him. We don't have to hold anything back from God. And so Zacchaeus, he lets it all out. And we are to seek Jesus at all costs and hold nothing back. Zacchaeus was also transformed by Jesus. Zacchaeus was transformed by Jesus. His life was completely transformed. A lot of commentators say when he came and stood up, the words they said, he stood before Jesus. A lot of commentators will say he was actually probably bowing and just kneeling before Jesus and just seeking that forgiveness. You see, Jesus grew Zacchaeus' heart, and he was never the same after that. And here is the only place that we see Zacchaeus' real wealth. He takes half of his possessions, sells them, and gives them to the poor. Half of them goes to the poor. Then he makes a restitution to anybody that he's cheated fourfold. The religious leaders, whenever they cheated people and they realized it, they only gave back double. They did not give, so he kind of went above and beyond. So he gave fourfold. And he did so. Why? Because of his love for Jesus. For what Jesus has just done in his life. And he gives out of his love. The rich young ruler in Luke 18, he had the same wealth. He didn't want to do it. He didn't want to do it. Zacchaeus, he gives joyfully. And he worshiped Jesus out of his wealth because of the love that was extended to him. Because he gave to God. Because he realized what God did in his life. See, he didn't give out of obligation or guilt. He gave as an act of love and worship. And when we give our offerings, that's how we give. We give out of our love. And we give out of our gratitude and our worship to God. See, we learn and we look at Zacchaeus. Our lives, his life was completely transformed. And you know what? Jesus wants to do the same thing to us. To transform us from the inside out. He wants to do